For millennia, we've been told a single version of history, a story of one God, one truth, and one chosen people. But what if that narrative was never meant to be told this way? What if history is far more intricate and fragmented than we were led to believe? This is the final episode, where everything comes together. We've uncovered the buried past, the hidden history of Yahweh, and his battle for dominance. He was once just a minor storm deity, a name whispered in the deserts of Midian and Edom. Yet, over centuries, Yahweh's followers reshaped divine history. Once a minor storm god, he rose above his rivals, not by fate, but by deliberate erasure. Myths were rewritten, scriptures were altered, and other gods faded into oblivion. Yet their presence lingers in fragments of ancient texts and suppressed traditions, in whispers beneath the surface of the Bible itself. What else has been buried? What else have they kept from us? If you're ready to challenge everything, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and join us as we pull back the final veil. Because the story you've been told is only half the truth. Tonight, we take it one step further. Why does Yahweh speak as if he is not alone? Why does Genesis say, "Let us make man in our image," instead of "in my image"? Was Yahweh once part of a greater pantheon, a council of divine beings? Did he rise above his celestial peers, rewriting history to claim ultimate power? Even as monotheism took shape, traces remained. Whispers of a second god, hints of angelic rulers governing nations, and echoes of an ancient celestial war that reshaped the heavens. And what if the final battle wasn't just theological, but political? Join us as we unravel the last chapter in this story, the moment when Yahweh's worshippers reshaped history itself. If you've made it this far, if you're ready to challenge everything one last time, drop a 7 in the comments, like this video, and let's step beyond the veil one final time. This is the final revelation, the truth they never wanted you to know. God represents the mortal race and serves as the ambassador sent by the ruler of all languages and all nations. Yet the desperate need to affirm that Yahweh exists above all creatures led to a mysterious transformation. Why does he speak as if referring to another god when he says, "Let us make man in the image of God," instead of "in my image"? This is no mere coincidence. There is no falsehood in this divine proclamation, for no mortal being can be shaped in the image of the supreme creator of the universe. Only after the model of a second god, the word of the supreme being, could such an idea take form. The philosophical interpretations of Genesis, explored by Alexander's scholars, insisted that Yahweh was entirely unlike anything he created. Even his personification led some thinkers back to a form of polytheism. Their pantheon included at least a supreme creator god, a second god who acted as his divine representative, archangels ruling over earthly kingdoms, and a host of celestial beings presiding over the physical universe. While such beliefs may not have been accepted by most ancient Jews, their presence until the 1st century AD and beyond directly contradicts the common notion that ancient Judaism was purely monotheistic. This raises an unsettling question. Should we even use terms like monotheism or polytheism when speaking of early Judaism? The lines are far more blurred than we were led to believe. In the beginning, chaos threatened to consume the world. A monstrous dragon, its 7 heads spewing floods, sought to drown all of creation. The council of the gods was in turmoil, overwhelmed by the growing power of twisted chaos. Hope seemed lost, until a younger god stepped forward with a bold proposal. He would slay the beast if they promised to make him king of the temple. The divine assembly, desperate, agreed. The young god armed himself with lightning, mounted his celestial chariot, and rode forth from the mountain of the gods. The skies darkened, thunder roared, and the storm rushed over the sea. With a single bolt of divine fire, he struck the dragon, piercing its many heads, shattering its monstrous form. The battle was won. The god stood victorious, his rule forever cemented. But this is not just any myth. This is the story of the biblical god, Yahweh, slaying the Leviathan. It is also the story of the Canaanite god Baal Hadad, defeating Lotan. It is the tale of Marduk, vanquishing Tiamat. It is a pattern repeated across civilizations, retold, reshaped, and ultimately absorbed into the Bible. Yahweh's triumph was not unique. It was part of a larger ancient war of the gods. When the Creator, God, often called Yahweh and Elohim, helped the Jews escape slavery in Egypt, worship only Him, filled with many gods, could not break. Yet Canaan nearly destroyed the indigenous people and two rival kingdoms, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Tempted into worshipping other gods, this defiance enraged punished them mercilessly. First a hostile nation to conquer Israel. Then Judah returned to reclaim their lost kingdom, to clutching monotheism more tightly than ever before. But history has early 20th century. Archaeologists uncovered the ruins of Ugaritic and hundreds of texts between the 14th and 12th centuries BC, far older language closely related to biblical Hebrew, a vast pantheon of gods, powerful deities worshipped by the very people from whom the Israelites emerged. The evidence was undeniable. Yahweh was not always alone. These discoveries challenged everything we thought we knew about Israelite history. Were the Israelites truly monotheistic from the beginning? Or had Yahweh fought for dominance, his victory written into Scripture, while his rivals were erased? Let's pause for a moment, because this revelation has greater implications than just history. Throughout history, religious narratives have been shaped by power struggles. Where one belief system rises, others are condemned. Throughout history, the gods of the past have been erased. Non-Yahweh worshippers were demonized. Why? To establish control, to rewrite divine history. This pattern isn't unique. It's a cycle repeated across civilizations. Even today, its echoes shape religious divisions. Because history? It's always written by the victors. But what if we looked beyond the narrative of the victors? What if we examined history from multiple angles, rather than accepting a single version of the truth? Enter Ground News, a platform that challenges misinformation by providing a full spectrum of perspectives. This app and website collect news from over 50,000 sources, allowing users to see all sides of a story. For example, a recent religious freedom report on the rise of bigotry following the Gaza war was covered in 55 articles, but a closer look showed that the majority of coverage leaned to one side. With Ground News, we can identify bias, ownership, and hidden narratives, helping us escape what I like to call Plato's cave, the echo chambers that keep us from seeing the full picture. Because history, like the Bible, is written by the victors, Pharaoh realized that the Ugaritic temple was Canaanite, and for the first time, we are not relying solely on the damning reports of their Jewish conquerors. We now have the Canaanites' own words, their own stories, revealing that biblical religion was far less monotheistic than its authors claimed. Contrary to the biblical account, most historians agree that the Exodus never happened. Instead, the ancient Israelites and Judeans were not outsiders. They were subcultures that emerged within Canaanite society. The Jews were originally Canaanites, and from the beginning, they were polytheists, not monotheists. The exact origins of Yahweh remain debated, but based on evidence from Ugaritic, other rediscovered ancient texts, and fragments within the Bible itself, the prevailing theory is that Yahweh worship developed in Midian or Edom before migrating north into Israel and Judah. Originally, Yahweh was a storm warrior deity much like the Canaanite god Baal Hadad. As Yahweh's followers gained socio-political dominance over centuries, they began absorbing the traits, myths, and roles of other gods, rewriting history until the worship of any deity other than Yahweh was systematically suppressed. This effort extended to editing the books of the Bible, altering or erasing passages that contain positive references to other gods. Yet, despite their best efforts, traces of this ancient polytheistic worldview remain buried in the text, waiting to be uncovered. At the head of the Canaanite pantheon was El, a god whose very name simply meant God. He was given many titles, including Elon, meaning supreme, and Shai, traditionally translated as Almighty. His wife, Asherah, also called Ashat, was the mother of the gods, and together they were believed to have parented the 70 deities that ruled over the cosmos. According to ancient tradition, humanity itself was divided into 70 nations, each governed by one of these divine rulers. This same concept appears in Genesis 10, which states that humanity was divided into 70 nations after Noah's flood. The historical narrative of the Hebrew Bible, spanning from Genesis to Kings, preserves remnants of this older Canaanite religious structure. Many of its earliest poems and songs, identified through linguistic features, are considered by scholars to be the oldest layers of the Bible. One such text is Deuteronomy 32, where we find a startling statement. When El distributed the nations, When he divided the sons of men, he fixed the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of sons of Yahweh's portion is his people, Jacob his inheritance. Yet, in the different versions of Deuteronomy, the blanks in this passage are filled with different words. The common Hebrew text states sons of Israel, while Greek copies translate it as angels of God or sons of God, creating a direct contradiction with the Hebrew version. Other ancient copies of this verse preserve the phrase sons of God, or even sons of the gods. What then did the original text say? It is clear that some form of the Hebrew word for God, whether El, Elohim, Elim, or Israel, was originally present. When comparing the alternative versions and examining the reasoning behind their differences, the evidence leads to a startling conclusion. The original form of this passage stated that the nations of the world were divided according to the sons of El. In this Canaanite theological framework, each nation was assigned to a god from El's divine pantheon. Yahweh was merely one among them, a single deity among many gods, his domain being Jacob, the Jewish nation. This implies that when this poem was first written, Yahweh was understood as one of El's sons, not the supreme god, but a god among gods. However, the author of Deuteronomy 32 saw Yahweh as one of the mighty, a god who had ascended in power, demanding recognition and praise. O gods, worship him, all of you. The echoes of this ancient polytheism do not end there. Psalm 82 further reveals Yahweh's role within a larger divine assembly. It states, Elohim has taken his place in the council of El. Among the gods he passes judgment. The scene is set, Yahweh not alone but surrounded by gods, standing in judgment over them. He demands, how long will you judge unjustly and favor the wicked? Judge for the weak and the orphan. Do justice for the lowly and the needy. Deliver them from the hands of the wicked. Yet these gods, his fellow deities, do not understand. They walk in darkness, unaware that their rule is coming to an end. This passage hints at a theological transformation, a shift in power where Yahweh rises above his divine brethren, no longer one God among many, but the one who will inherit dominion over all. The foundations of the earth tremble as Yahweh, also known as Elohim, stands in the divine council and proclaims, I say that you are the sons of the God of El, all of you. However, you will die like men and fall like one of the princes. Arise, Elohim, judge the earth, for all the nations belong to you. The author sets the scene. Yahweh, seated among the gods, stands as a judge over them, mirroring the Ugaritic concept of the divine assembly, a council of deities governing the world. The hymn identifies these beings as gods and the sons of El, yet Yahweh accuses them of failure. Their crime? They have failed to execute justice, neglecting the weak, the orphaned, and the oppressed. Their punishment? The ultimate penalty, death. Though they are divine, they will be cast down, stripped of power, and forced to perish like mortals. Their dominions, once their own, will be taken from them and given to Yahweh, who will rule with justice. This moment echoes Exodus 12:12, where Yahweh vows to punish the gods of Egypt for allowing the Hebrews to be enslaved. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will kill the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from man to animal, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am Yahweh. The author's message is clear. He does not reject the Canaanite worldview that nations were ruled by different gods, nor does he deny that Yahweh was once among them. Instead, the hymn reflects a transformation, a historical shift in which Yahweh's followers grew in power, slowly diminishing the role of other deities until they were no longer considered worthy of worship. This hymn, perhaps unintentionally, alludes to the historical evolution of Yahweh worship, which began as a rising subculture within the broader Canaanite religion. The glorification of Yahweh over the entire pantheon is seen throughout the Bible, though often in subtle, less direct ways. The people of Israel and Judah passed down a vast array of ancient traditions, stories of creation, heroic legends, and folk tales of wise and noble ancestors who had received divine favor. However, when these stories were collected and edited into a single, cohesive historical narrative, contradictions emerged. Yahweh's true origins as a god among many were slowly rewritten, his rise to absolute supremacy carefully crafted into the fabric of the biblical text. Traditions often coexist within the same biblical texts, creating contradictions that reveal an evolving theology. According to one tradition, the creator god was originally known to humans only by names such as El, Eli, or Elohim, as seen in sources like Genesis 1:1, 5:1, 17:1, 28:3, 31:13, and 35:11. In this view, Yahweh's true name was only revealed later when he summoned Moses as his prophet during the Exodus. This is explicitly stated in Exodus 6:23, where Elohim speaks to Moses saying, "I am Yahweh. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob with the name Eli, but I did not make myself known to them by my name, Yahweh." However, this directly contradicts another tradition that insists mankind always knew the Creator as Yahweh from the beginning. The patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, repeatedly called upon Yahweh by name, and when Yahweh summoned Moses, he simply identified himself as the same deity their ancestors had known all along. This tension between two competing narratives mirrors a broader historical shift in Israelite theology, marking the logical next step after Psalm 82. Yahweh's followers initially preserved stories in which their ancestors worshipped the Canaanite god El. But over time, as Yahweh's role in temple worship expanded, a new belief emerged, that Yahweh was simply another name for El. This theological shift led to the creation of the statement in Exodus 6, an attempt to reconcile the contradiction. However, the process was far from linear. Some Yahweh worshippers believed he was El, while others rejected this idea. The contradiction only became a serious problem when these differing traditions were combined into what we now know as Genesis and Exodus. With the merging of Yahweh and El, Yahweh became the undisputed head of the pantheon. But what about El's wife, Asherah? If Yahweh was now identified with El, did Asherah become Yahweh's consort? The Bible is almost silent on this, but the few references to her are overwhelmingly negative, condemning Asherah worship and related ritual objects. However, archaeological discoveries tell a different story. A 10th century BCE altar found at Tanakh depicts Asherah standing beside Yahweh, while 9th century BCE inscriptions from Kuntilat Adrud and Setad refer to a ritual object belonging to Yahweh and his Asherah. This suggests that her worship persisted far longer than the biblical authors would have us believe. Similarly, the conflation of Yahweh and El raises the question of whether the pantheon still lingers in the Hebrew Bible beyond what we have seen. Genesis 6 speaks of the sons of the gods taking human women as wives, while the book of Job begins with the sons of Elohim gathering before Yahweh, their ruler. Another striking example appears in Deuteronomy 4 verse 19-20, which warns, "And when you look up to the sky and see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the heavenly hosts, do not be led astray and bow before them in worship." Here, the existence of other gods is not denied, only the Israelites are forbidden from worshiping them. The things that Yahweh, your God, has distributed to every nation under heaven, but Yahweh has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be his people. For this author, the reality of other gods is taken for granted. The worship of these other gods by nations across the world is not outright denied, but it is forbidden for the Jews. The argument is not that these gods do not exist, but rather that the Israelites alone must remain devoted to Yahweh. This is the same idea found in Deuteronomy 32, except by this point, theology had evolved. Yahweh was no longer just one of many gods within the divine assembly. Now he was the supreme ruler, the one who had assigned nations to the gods while keeping the Jews for himself. With the Canaanite temple structure acknowledged by multiple biblical authors, we would expect to find direct references to its gods in the Bible, and indeed, they are there. Some passages dismiss the gods of Israel's enemies, but others prove that Yahweh was not as all-powerful as his followers believed. In Judges 13, verse 18, Yahweh's promise to aid the Jews in battle was thwarted by the superior military technology of their enemies. In 2 Kings 3, Yahweh vowed to help the Israelites and Judeans defeat the Moabites, but his promise failed. Why? Because the Moabites offered proper sacrifices to their own god Kas. Yahweh, it seems, was defeated on the battlefield, not by men, but by another deity. Various Canaanite gods are known through Ugaritic texts, their names preserved in older external sources. While some of these gods appear in the Hebrew text of the Bible, their identities are mostly obscured in English translations. One example comes from a storm myth in which Baal Hadad, the god of rain and fertility, is swallowed by the god of death. Though Baal is eventually rescued, the story explains the seasonal droughts, as Baal's temporary descent into the underworld halts the rains. This mirrors the Greek myth of Hades abducting Persephone, causing winter. However, in Isaiah 25, a prophecy from the 8th or 7th century BCE, this myth is completely reversed. Instead of Baal being swallowed, Yahweh himself becomes the victorious God, ensuring abundant prosperity for Israel and Judah. The prophet declares, "On this mountain, Yahweh Sabaoth will prepare a feast for all nations, a banquet of rich food, a feast of aged wine, meat full of marrow, wine well refined. He will destroy the shroud that covers the nations, and he will swallow death forever. Then the Lord Yahweh will wipe away the tears from every face." The ancient myth is rewritten, placing Yahweh in the position of supreme power, reshaping older Canaanite traditions into a new vision of monotheistic dominion. And the reproach of his people will be removed from all the earth, because Yahweh has spoken. Instead of Mot, the god of death, swallowing Baal Hadad, leading to agricultural failure, it is Yahweh himself who will swallow Mot, bringing a great feast for all people. The illusion of death Lord Mot is also found in Job 18:13, where it is written, "The firstborn of Mot will consume their limbs." Similarly, in Psalm 49:14, like sheep, they are appointed for Sheol, their shepherd. Straight to the grave they go down, and their form will perish. A few chapters later, in Isaiah, the author once again borrows from the myth of Baal Hadad. But rather than Baal slaying the chaos dragon Lotan, it is now Yahweh himself who kills Leviathan. Isaiah's description of Leviathan is taken almost verbatim from the surviving myth of Baal in Ugaritic, where Leviathan is called the fleeing serpent, the writhing serpent. This mirrors the exact phrasing in Isaiah, where Leviathan, the great dragon of the deep, is named as Yahweh's defeated enemy. The Leviathan myth appears multiple times in the Hebrew Bible, sometimes under the name Rahab. In certain passages, Leviathan is depicted as the primordial chaos beast, a force of untamed destruction that only Yahweh can conquer. Yet in other instances, this dragon is reduced to nothing more than Yahweh's creation, stripped of its former divine power. Two lesser-known Canaanite gods, twin siblings, Shalim and Shahar, also find their shadows in the biblical text. Shalim, the god of dusk, and Shahar, the god of dawn, played an integral role in Canaanite cosmology, yet their presence in the Bible is barely acknowledged. The name Jerusalem is often interpreted by later religious scholars as meaning "city of peace," due to its political and religious significance. However, ancient sources tell a different story. Competing origin myths claim that Jerusalem was either named only after David conquered the Canaanite Jebusites, or that it evolved from an older Canaanite name dating back to a legendary priest-king, Melchizedek. Yet Egyptian records from as early as the 14th century BCE, and possibly even the 19th century BCE, confirm that Jerusalem had already been known by its common name for centuries before the rise of the Judean monarchy. Its name is now widely understood to mean Foundation of Shalim, named after the Canaanite god of twilight. Though Shalim appears indirectly in the Bible through Jerusalem's name, his brother, Shahar, is mentioned explicitly only once, in a passage that is clearly borrowed from a much older myth. Isaiah 14:3-23 contains a prophecy against a king of a hostile nation, condemning him for his arrogance and cruelty. The prophet foretells a disgraceful death, one so terrible that the king will not even receive a proper burial. To emphasize the king's downfall, the prophet compares him to a celestial being, a rebellious force that dared to rise above its station, but was struck down. Yet, centuries of translations and Christian reinterpretations have obscured the original mythological allusions, burying this pre-Israelite tale beneath layers of later doctrine, made it harder for them to recognize. How you have fallen from heaven, son of Shahar. How you were cut down to the ground, you who brought down the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne higher than the stars of El. I will sit on the mount of meeting, on the heights of Zaphon. I will ascend to the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like El. But you will be brought down to Sheol, to the depths of the abyss. In this passage, the father of the Canaanite pantheon, El, is mentioned twice. while 3 direct references to the temple structure appear. First, we see the stars of El, recalling Deuteronomy 4, which states that the stars were considered gods. Then, we have the Mount of Council, mirroring the Ugaritic terms for the divine assembly. Lastly, the author references Zaphon, the sacred mountain where the gods gathered, a Canaanite counterpart to Mount Olympus in Greek mythology. The king in question is named Hillel, son of Shahar, and since Shahar is the son of El, this would make Hillel the grandson of El. The exact myth that Isaiah repurposed is lost, but scholars have suggested connections to Atar, Phaethon, or Hallelu. Clearly, this passage is inspired by astrology. Venus, the morning star, rises at dawn and attempts to ascend higher than the other stars, staying visible even in daylight. Like Icarus, the minor god whose arrogance led to his downfall, Hillel flies too close to the sun and falls. Isaiah 14 assumes that the reader understands this polytheistic myth, using it as a rebuke against a mortal king for his delusions of grandeur. However, as Greek translations rendered Hillel's name as Heosphoros, and Latin versions called him Lucifer, later Christians misinterpreted this passage, assuming that the king in Isaiah's prophecy was actually an angel named Satan. This misunderstanding spread, influencing Ezekiel 28, which contains a similar condemnation of a mortal king, using mythological references. Elsewhere in Isaiah, another lesser-known deity appears. In Ugaritic literature, we find references to Habi, a dark underworld god or demon, so terrifying that even El feared him. Isaiah 26:20 mentions this Habi as a figure of fear, subtly preserving remnants of Canaanite mythology. The presence of other gods in Israelite and Judean culture is often obscured in English translations, hidden beneath layers of later theological interpretation. One striking example is Samson, whose story in the Book of Judges is a Sunday school favorite. The judges were warrior heroes, rising to protect Israel before the establishment of the monarchy. But among these figures, Samson stands apart. His story is the most overtly mythological. As we reach the final chapter of this journey, one truth becomes undeniable. History is never as simple as we were told. The rise of Yahweh, the erasure of rival gods, and the rewriting of ancient myths reveal a far more complex and hidden past than what mainstream narratives suggest. Yahweh's path from a minor storm deity to the supreme God of Israel was not inevitable. It was a battle for dominance, a war waged in both theology and politics. Yet, the echoes remain. In scripture, in archaeology, in forgotten myths buried beneath layers of doctrine. What else lies hidden? What other truths have been silenced? The search for answers doesn't end here. Has this series changed the way you see history? If so, hit subscribe and drop a comment. Tell us what surprised you most. What are your theories? What secrets do you think are still buried? Smash that like button so more people can join the discussion, and share this video to keep these hidden truths alive. This is just the beginning of uncovering the past, because truth, once revealed, can never be hidden again.